Welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast. I'm your host, KristiYork Wooten, and this episode features Jason Narducy. He is a musician who's worked with everyone from Bob Mould, Superchunk, to Sunny Day Real Estate, even Eddie Vedder. He's had his own bands, and currently he's on tour with actor Michael Shannon, performing R.E.M songs around the country. The pair are out on the road again this year, celebrating the 40th anniversary of R.E.M's fourth full-length album, Life's Rich Pageant, from 1986. So Jason will tell me what they're playing, what R.E.M's music means to him, and a very highly secretive sweet song. Welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast. Well, Jason, welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast. Appreciate you being on to talk about, of course, one of our favorite all-time topics, which is R.E.M. And you and Michael Shannon have been touring R.E.M. albums for the last couple of years. We're finally made it around to R.E.M's album, Life's Rich Pageant, which you'll be performing at the 40 Watt in Athens at the end of February. So we're excited to see that. And great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kristi.
One thing that I wanted to talk to you about in particular that has always fascinated me, which is, the time that R.E.M. was coming up. R.E.M., is several years older than me, but we share a lot of the same influences, and so much of that is, I think, regional. And I wanted to talk to you about the first time you heard R.E.M. and what you thought about that music, not being somebody who was part of this, Athens, Atlanta, South Carolina, North Carolina scene that they came out of.
I grew up in Evanston, Illinois, which is the first city north of Chicago on the lake. And in 1985, my friend John Peters told me that he had just seen R.E.M. at the UIC Pavilion on the Fables tour, and they were his favorite band. And I can't remember if it was Driver 8 or Can't Get There From Here, but one of those two was the first R.E.M. song that I heard from John, which I really liked. But, when you're 16, 15 years old, you don't always, especially back then, it's not like you just open your phone and listen to it or buy it. So I didn't buy a record right away. It wasn't until Document came out a couple years later that I bought my first R.E.M. record. And Finest Work song, that first song starts, and I just realized that this band was for me. And then I was able to go backwards and Life's Rich Pageant, which is the tour, the 40th anniversary that we're celebrating this year, that record really resonated with me. This is a really special experience to get deeply inside an album that I love and work with friends on. No one can sound like R.E.M., but we can try to come close to capturing the spirit of the record, which is what we hope to do. And, Michael is such a captivating performer, and he's a great singer. It's really fun to just kind of celebrate this great band and their albums in entirety with people that I care about. And then, the shows tend to be, it feels like there isn't even a stage. It feels like we're at eye level with the audience because they're feeling the joy that we're feeling, which is, isn't this music just incredible? It's pretty surreal for me because I'm accustomed to playing in bands that play original music where you're kind of letting people know about the new record, or it's a different approach to performing. This is just us standing on stage and smiling, honestly. It's pretty cool.
Well, the whole thing about bands, coming up, especially any kind of punk influenced band or anybody like that coming up, and anybody who played cover songs was like, unless it was just something super cool in the same way that the Sex Pistols did. What made you think it was okay? Like, you and Michael Shannon, you're putting this project together. What just inside you said, we have to do this? Obviously, the love for R.E.M. is one, but what inside you made you say, okay, this is deemed cool now? It's cool to play.
No, we didn't. That's not, this is part of why I like this project so much, is that it wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a, big idea. It wasn't, oh, let's do this. Michael Shannon and I have been playing music for 12 years only in Chicago. And because of our schedules, him obviously with acting and me with my touring bands, would only be able to find one time a year when we're both in Chicago for 3 days, 2 days, where we pick a record, I assemble a band, we practice the night before and play the entire record, whatever it was, a Bob Dylan record, a Neil Young record, Modern Lovers. Speaking of the Sex Pistols, they covered Roadrunner. And and then it's gone. It was a really fun kind of pop-up project, and that's all we did for Murmur in 2023, but what happened was the show sold really well, and I got emails from promoters around the country, and I said to Michael, "What do you think about doing a short little tour?" He's like, "Well, I've never done a rock tour before." I said, "Well, you wanna try 9 shows?" And he was kinda like, "Ooh, I don't know." But we did it, and he loved it, so that's how last year we did a 20 show tour, and this year's 22, so it just grew organically, and it's basically this thing that was born out of a project that had been going on for years in Chicago, and kind of it resonated, and then the fact that the band REM heard about it and went to our first Athens show, that was so wild for us. I mean, that was hard for us to wrap our head around.
I think that's part of the magic and the appeal of it for me is that they're in on the surprise of it, they're in on it with you now, and which as a musician, I'd probably be nervous about that a little bit, but also I think it kinda lifts you up a little bit. It's like, "Hey, it really is about the music, and any way to get it out there, is a great way to get it out there." I also think the trend of obviously, over the past several years, old music is new music. So, the trend on streaming is people are rediscovering so many things from the last several decades and beyond. And also in the last few years, just politically and just all the strife that people emotionally are going through in their respective bubbles, music has been one of the few things to break through that. And I think the familiarity and the just love that people have for those songs, especially REM's music, makes people feel unified when they come to an event like that where they can be part of the music.
I hope so, that's what we feel, and, you mentioned, intimidation and nervousness. This is another unique thing about those guys, the REM band members, is that they're really disarming. They're really friendly, and somebody asked me once, "Do I ever feel like when I'm around them like a peer?" I said, "Absolutely not." You know, like, those guys are legends in my eyes and to most people, but they do a great job of just making you feel like you're a part of the tribe, and that makes it a lot more comfortable to play songs in front of them or with them, and they're also Peter Buck is and Mills does this too, he'll occasionally just be like, "Oh, so it actually goes to this chord here, and if you use this voicing, it's a little bit." It's really adorable. So often, Doug, the other guitar player in the band, who's an amazing guitar player, a very, very close friend, Peter Buck will show us something, and we're like, "God damn, that's so much easier than what we were playing."
Well, I was gonna ask you too, given your history and you've played with absolutely everyone, which is amazing, but how do you get so I consider, REM is part of a jangle sound that was handed down from the '60s, among other influences in there, but I would say jangle to me is this their magic is in a lot of that playing, but, you've played all different styles. How do you bring your own sort of touch to things like that?
Well, you can't
Um
help but do that. That's just kind of instinct. I mean, part of the process of getting inside these songs and these chords and voicings, it's an incredible opportunity to learn, which has been very rewarding for me. And also just hilarious because, for instance, the intro to which song is it? I think it's Hyena. That's a song that I'd never learned before. And the intro is exactly the same chords as an intro of one of my songs, split single song called 95%. Just, different tempo, different, accents, but the same chords. And it's just a reminder of how much that band is in my DNA. And so it's a wild experience, but yeah, I mean, we can't basically what we try to do is touch on the really important hooks and the really important feels of all the songs. And after that, you can't, it's not worth it to try to replicate it perfectly, in my opinion. But I think we do a pretty good job of it. And you just can't help but let, instincts take over. And everybody in the band has their own style and their own bands and their own projects. And you're going to hear some of that.
Do you have any specific so with I'll give you a little bit of my origin story with this album with Life's Rich Pageant. I just happened to fall at the age I think I was in 10th grade when it came out, and this is the moment I mean, REM was so famous. I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, and REM was not necessarily a local band, but I mean, we were all in sort of the same sphere there of who was touring locally, and I was too young to get into the clubs and things like that. But Life's Rich Pageant is when REM played their first, at least for us, the first local big show at Clemson University's Littlejohn Coliseum, and the Maniacs opened, and so that album and that tour very much front of mind. I can remember everything about that day and going to that show. What are some of your memories of Life's Rich Pageant? And then also want to talk about some specific songs as well.
Well, as I mentioned, I had to go backwards. Document was my first record, so that was the first record that I purchased by them and really obsessively listened to, and then once I realized that there was more records before it, I went backwards, and Life's Rich Pageant, of those 4 before it, really resonated for me. But now that we've learned so many of these songs, I mean, Chronic Town just kills me. When we did the Murmur tour, we would play the whole record and then walk off stage and then come back out and do all of Chronic Town and a bunch of other songs. And there's something about Chronic Town that just the pacing of it and the energy of it, the rawness of this, brand new band recording for the first time. And yeah, gosh, I could go on and on about R.E.M. But I didn't see the band until 2000 something. I was really late with the live catching them live. So unfortunately, I don't have the college arena gymnasium stories.
Let me ask you about some of the songs though. What is has been most surprising to you while learning some of the songs from Life's Rich Pageant?
It's surprising that I'm not going to play anything on Under the Bunker. Uh, there's a lot of Doug and I are, we're swapping out different parts. And for instance, he's going to play acoustic guitar on Fall on Me. I'm going to play acoustic guitar on What If We Give It Away. And with What If We Give It Away, that's a song that in high school I learned how to play. And I learned the main electric guitar part, and now I'm playing the acoustic part, which is very different and more sparse. But I'm also doing a ton of singing with Michael on that one. So it's really interesting to take a different angle than how my ears were hearing it for decades. And that's just part of putting together a presentation of a beloved record and trying to do it in a way that people will enjoy.
When you're not growing up in the South and when you're not learning about REM from the perspective of being in the South, what were your perceptions of bands? I mean, I don't want to say that regionalism existed everywhere and that people were biased against, but I certainly do think that bands from the South felt like they had to work harder and try to be more visible. In some ways, REM obviously wasn't going along with the trends at the time of, being in the 80s glam and all of that when they came out. So they weren't trying visually that way. But in terms of, just perceptions about music from the South, do you remember any of that?
It
Yeah.
wasn't so much a South thing for me because I was too young to understand that. Of course, I could hear some of the Southern influences in their music, but to me, they resonated because they weren't classic rock and they weren't punk rock, but they had a punk rock ethos. They did everything on their own terms. I mean, you mentioned not being able to get into the clubs. REM didn't play clubs for very long. They got
Yeah.
pretty big pretty quick as far as the size of venues. Like I mentioned, my friend John Peters went to see them at the UIC Pavilion on their 3rd record in a venue it holds 10,000 people. But it resonated with me that they were different. They felt like they were on the outskirts. There was a mystery to not only the lyrics, but also the artwork. It was very non-traditional. They didn't do videos. People talk about the Replacements being all, anti-corporate rock by not doing videos. It's like, well, there was a band years before that did that. And so they were paving their own way, and that really resonated with me. And of course, they didn't sound like any other bands that were on my radar. Tons of bands tried to sound like them afterwards, and I can't think of one that really did it and were able to create their own path. So they were singular. It's a singular band, and I think the thing that is most amazing to me looking back is how well the music stands up. I mean, I think we all have music that we discovered when we were young or even 20 years ago that we listen to now and go, wow, that doesn't really stand the test of time. There was something about it that connected to me then, and now that's gone, and that's just not the case with REM. In fact, it might be stronger.
Well, and not only standing the test of time, but how perceptions of songs have changed or what they mean to people change over time. I mean, "Fall on Me" was always my favorite track from Life's Rich Pageant, and it still is, but now I'm going back and hearing other songs in a different way. But R.E.M's catalog in general, something like "Shiny Happy People," which a lot of people at the time were like, "Oh, that's just a fun thing," and now, even though it's still just delightful and light in many ways, it feels deeper than it was to begin with.
Can
So
I tell you a funny story about that one?
yeah, please do.
I was very fortunate in 2019 to make, as I said, I had this project called Split Single, which is basically a solo project with a band name. And I recorded the record with John Worster, who's in this Shannon band with me, and on drums, and Mike Mills on bass. And John and I are both huge REM fans, and because Mike Mills is so open and approachable, you really feel like occasionally during some downtime you can ask him a question, and we would. And I remember we were sitting in the control room waiting for something to get set up, and John said to Mike, "Hey, Mike, how did the band feel about the kind of backlash to Shiny Happy People? Because people really there was a very vocal group that was like, what the hell happened to our band?" And Mike looked over at my acoustic guitar and asked me if he could pick it up and play it. I'm like, "Yeah, of course, please do." And he said, "I came up with these chords," and he played the chords. And then he said, "Then Peter came up with this lick." And he played that lick, and the hair on my arms went straight up. And it's so funny that that's not a song I would put on by REM, but oh my god, it's so catchy, and it's got this charm. And then Mike said, "We made a video and we thought it was pretty obvious that this was a children's song, but people still didn't get it." But they lost no sleep over that supposed backlash. And I agree with you. I think a song like that, you listen back now and you go, well, that's just a really catchy, fun, light-hearted song.
And the video, to your point, is kind of what has made it stick around. I think obviously they did, or I'm trying to think if Michael Stipe appeared on Sesame Street for that song or the band did. I can't remember. But also the video that they made at the time for the song came back during the pandemic and has come back at different times of just people needing the song, needing the sentiment of it, and with no trace of, backlash or anything, just pure enjoyment. And I'm sorry, I tell Mike Mills all this time, and he'll probably hear me say it again, is that the way his backing vocals work, or, anytime he's got vocals on a track that are prominent like that, and the way it works against the instrumentation and also interplay with Michael's voice, to me is like one of the major secret sauces of
Oh,
REM.
of course. I mean, talk about Fall on Me. Mike
Yeah.
Mills is singing an entirely different chorus. I remember a couple years ago, I was in the grocery store, and in this particular grocery store, the the music that they play is loudest in the bread aisle. So I'm in the bread aisle, and Fall on Me comes on, and I'm like, Mike Mills is singing the chorus of this song, but I think most listeners gravitate to Michael Stipe's melody in that, which of course is beautiful, but there's so much more that Mike Mills is saying at the same time. And I completely agree. And it's something that happens in a lot of their songs in these early records where even in the verses, I mean, I think Hyena, Mike Mills is singing other lyrics at the same time, different melody, and, I mean, who does that? It's so odd, but it is very much a part of their sound. I actually did reach out to Mike Mills, when I was first learning Hyena, and I was like, "What are you singing there? There's nothing online that has your lyrics," and he said, "Gosh, I don't remember, and I think I changed it every show," and I said, "That's great news for me because then I can't mess it up."
You can put your true own spin on it. All right, well, now we gotta talk about the sweet song. So what is your, and you don't have to narrow it down to one, but what is your sweet REM song? What is the one that just encapsulates what the band means to you?
That's really I'm terrible at that. I For this batch, well, I can't say actually because 'cause we're keeping the bonus tracks a secret, but there's a song that we're playing, after we play Lyser's Pageant all the way through. We walk off the stage for 2 minutes and walk back out and play a bunch of REM songs. And one of the songs that we're playing it gets me very emotional, and I'm gonna have to steel myself because I'm singing it with Michael, and I think there's going to be some shows where I'm not able to hold it together. Here's I'll give you one clue. It's 2 chords.
I know where you're at, but we'll let our listeners be surprised when they show up at the 41.
Yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with me about this, and life's Rich Pageant and the shows that are coming up, and continued success with these outings. And hopefully you'll just keep going until you guys do the whole catalog, you know?
Thank you, Kristi. I really appreciate that. It was fun talking to you.
The Sweet Song Podcast is written and hosted by me, KristiYork Wooten, and produced by Sustenance Group, LLC. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out on Apple, YouTube, and Pure Pop for Now People for all the details. See you next time on the Sweet Song Podcast, where we unwrap your favorite songs.